An intern could do this job. That's what Brandon, my new regional manager, a man with the situational awareness of a wilting houseplant, said out loud in front of my team. My team. 15 years of early morning starts, canceled family trips, navigating the intricate supply chain of a global food empire through seasonal gluts and unexpected crises. And this walking caricature had the gall to say I was replaceable by someone whose biggest decision was what topping to put on their gluten-free pizza. The warehouse floor went silent. I could hear Mike from shipping's nervous laugh catch in his throat. Sarah from procurement just stared, her eyes wide like she'd just witnessed an unboxing gone horribly wrong. I didn't say a word, just nodded, stood up, and placed my security card on his desk. The quiet click as it hit the wood was the only sound. I walked out, no tears, no yelling, just that strange stillness you feel right before the first tremor of an earthquake. The worst part wasn't the public dismissal. It was the look in Brandon's eyes, a look of pure conquest, as if letting me go was the first act of his reign. He turned to the intern next to him, Chloe, fresh from business school, and said, "Let's get you up to speed on Bella's logistics flows. It's just routine data entry." Chloe looked like she was about to be sick. She'd shadowed me for 2 days and still couldn't tell the difference between a cold storage manifest and a cross-docking schedule. It wasn't her fault. The system wasn't built to be simple. It was designed to be precise. And I had personally coded most of the modules during the Great Recall 5 years back. The system was like a fussy child. It only listened to me. But Brandon wouldn't know that, because Brandon didn't ask. He was the kind of manager who believed synergy and efficiency were a replacement for expertise. He wanted to streamline and optimize, and I was simply an outdated variable. By the time I reached my car, an old sedan with more character than shine, my phone buzzed. 3 unread messages in the team chat. "Mike, OMG, did that just happen? Sarah, are we okay? Chloe, I'm so sorry. I didn't know he was going to." I turned my phone off, sat in the driver's seat, and just breathed. My hands rested on the steering wheel, still, silent, like my mind was processing something my body hadn't caught up with yet. The storm hadn't hit, but I could feel the change in the air. I had kept that system running longer than most of my colleagues had been at the company. When a federal food safety audit nearly shut us down 5 years ago, it was me who stayed up until 3 a.m. doing emergency compliance updates. No one in management ever saw. It was me who got the quiet call from the CEO himself, Mr. Harrison, personally asking, "Can you keep this thing stable until we can figure it out?" And I had, quietly, steadily, like a tourniquet on a major artery. But Brandon, he had just cut the tourniquet, told everyone it wasn't needed anymore. So I drove home, windows down, letting the wind tangle my hair. The city skyline behind me looked like a closing curtain. I didn't know what was next, but I knew one thing. They'd realize the truth soon. Because while Brandon was delegating my responsibilities to an intern who still used sticky notes for her passwords, a very real countdown had already started ticking. And once that timer hit 0, Chloe would need more than a company handbook to keep $240 million in government food supply contracts from going up in smoke. I pulled into my driveway just as the sun dipped below the horizon. My neighbor was watering his lawn like the world hadn't just shifted on its axis. I gave a small wave. He waved back, oblivious. Inside, I opened my personal laptop. Not the work one. I left that fossil behind. This was my personal machine, my true command center, the one with copies of everything I was never supposed to have. But I knew better. I'd seen too many unexpected layoffs turn into panicked 2 a.m. phone calls from former bosses begging for undocumented fixes. I began the process, backed up my logs, exported my certification renewals, and saved my access history. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was a ritual, like a captain checking the lifeboats on a ship he's about to abandon. The thing people never understood about that system was that it only worked because I knew where it would fail. I didn't just manage it. I understood its language. It talked to me in code, in timing, in corrupted logs, and subtle misfires. It was complex and ungrateful, but it was mine. At 9:17 p.m., my phone lit up with a number I knew but hadn't saved. Corporate headquarters. I let it ring. Seconds later, a voicemail came through. I hit play on speaker while pouring myself a glass of iced tea. "Hello, Bella. This is Mr. Harrison's assistant. He asked me to check in regarding an unexpected transition earlier today. He wasn't informed beforehand. He's asked if you could give him a direct call back when you have a moment." The tone was polite, but the subtext was clear. We might have just made a very expensive mistake. I set the phone down, untouched. I knew what the system would do when my administrator tokens timed out. 36 hours from my last login, it would enter a suspended state, a protocol I personally wrote. It would start rejecting new access requests and flag all compliance logs. Once that happened, government auditors would have to step in. They hadn't just fired an employee, they had fired the safety net. Monday morning, Brandon strutted in like he had just been crowned king. A fresh haircut and a smug little grin on his face. "All right, team," he said, clapping his hands together like a TV show host. "Chloe and David will be dividing up Bella's, logistical documentation workflows. Just routine stuff." Sarah looked like she was about to choke on her smoothie. David, the junior analyst, visibly paled. He opened his browser and typed Legacy Fulfillment Bella Doc site into the search bar. Nothing came up because I never made a public site. The system wasn't supposed to be public. Chloe was already hunched over her borrowed station, clicking through an interface she didn't recognize, her forehead slick with sweat. There's an error here," she mumbled. "It says Vault 77 token expired, custodian undefined," and then it crashed. Brandon didn't even flinch. "That's just residual noise. It'll sort itself out." That's what he called the software I'd basically resurrected from a digital corpse with nothing but half-broken vendor notes and a command prompt. That noise had teeth. Vault 77 didn't crash. It locked down. It only gave that error when the master token signature went unmatched during a routine audit sync. And it only did that when someone like me, who wrote that part of the failsafe, revoked their own credentials, which I had done at exactly 8:43 a.m. from home. I logged into my secure offline backup console one last time, clicked the button labeled Revoke Admin Token, and it prompted me with a warning. Warning: custodian token removal will initiate a federal audit lockdown within 36 hours if no replacement is assigned and verified. I clicked yes. The screen flashed, then went dark. There it was, the silent kill switch. The system would still look operational on the outside for now. It would accept inputs. But deep inside, the compliance verification thread had just entered a ticking loop. The junior analyst, David, meanwhile, was Googling what custodian undefined meant. I imagined him on Reddit by lunchtime, posting something like, "Help, food logistics software, throwing weird errors. Boss says ignore." Should I be worried? Oh, honey. Brandon called a meeting at 2 p.m. He sat at the head of the table, grinning like a man who thought spreadsheets were the peak of innovation. "Smooth sailing?" he asked. Chloe held up her notepad. It was blank except for a single post-it note that read, "Asked about two-factor authentication," underlined 3 times. She looked like she'd aged 5 years since breakfast. "I can't get access to the warehouse vault. The terminal keeps rejecting my credentials," she mumbled. "Did you submit the role reassignment through the proper channels?" Brandon asked. "Yes, but it says my role lacks historical signature parity. I don't know what that means." Brandon rolled his eyes so hard I swear he sprained something. God, Bella really overcomplicated everything. "We'll escalate to IT. Shouldn't legal be notified?" Sarah asked softly. He laughed. "Legal doesn't need to know about error messages. He was wrong. So wrong. Because Vault 77 didn't care about titles. It cared about one thing, that the digital signature tied to the federal supply chain logs matched the one the government had on record. And that signature, mine, was gone. No signature, no verification. No verification, no contracts. And while Brandon was passing around blame like it was leftover pizza, I was sitting on my back porch sipping tea, watching the sunset. Inside, my personal console pinged once. A single line. Custodian status, revoked. Countdown to lockdown, 33H12M07S. They could keep pushing buttons. The shell looked fine, but it was already hollow, and it was about to collapse. The first ripple hit at 7:42 a.m. on Tuesday. The head of IT, Mark, a usually unflappable man who spoke in technical acronyms and kept stress balls shaped like servers, got an automated alert. Sync anomaly detected. Audit logs not verified with central registry for 23 hours. To most people, that's gibberish. In our world, that's a check engine light flashing while the hood is on fire. Mark blinked at the screen, scrolled, then blinked again. He clicked through the error log and found the source. Vault 77, my system. The logs stopped syncing the moment my token was revoked. One line kept repeating, custodian notified, signature rejected. And then, like a punch to the gut, he found my name still listed on every active filing. No replacement custodian filed. Nothing. Meanwhile, down in legal, Sarah, the same Sarah from the meeting, was sipping her morning coffee and scanning the automated compliance digest when she frowned. She picked up the phone and dialed Brandon. "Hey, looking at the quarterly filings?" she said, her voice level. "Has Bella's custodial handover been finalized?" "Oh, that. Yeah, Chloe's picking it up. She's got it covered," Brandon said, mid-bite of a donut. Bella's stuff was just old administrative procedures. "You assigned Chloe?" Sarah asked, her voice tight. "Yes. Look, don't worry, we're modernizing." Mark burst into Brandon's office 6 minutes later. No knock, just stormed in, laptop in hand, open to the audit trace screen. "Tell me you've got Bella's handover logged with the registry." Brandon, flustered, waved him off. "It's just being dramatic." Mark pointed at the screen. "We're not syncing. The federal system has rejected our last 3 uploads. If this keeps up, they'll shut down our ability to operate." "Okay, calm down. I'll get Chloe to fix the API keys." Mark leaned in, cold and quiet. "This has nothing to do with API keys. This is about federal authorization. You fired the only person legally cleared to touch that system." Brandon looked like a man trying to lie with his face, but realizing he left his poker face in his other suit. She was a middle-tier admin. "Anyone can do that job." Mark didn't even blink. "Explain to legal why her name is still on every active record." Silence. At that exact moment across town, I was sitting at my kitchen table in sweatpants, eating dry cereal straight from the box, watching the little loading spinner on my laptop. I opened a draft email. The recipient field was already filled in. H. Johnson at Federal Food Oversight. Henry Johnson, my contact at the federal office. We'd worked together for years. I typed one sentence. "Per our custodial protocol, please see the attached transition void for your records." Attached was a single PDF, a formal confirmation that the custodian role had been vacated due to employment termination with no assigned replacement. Time-stamped, digitally signed, irrevocable. I hit send. That was it. No drama, no threats, just a trigger. Back at headquarters, legal and compliance started to do what they do best. Panic behind closed doors. But Brandon, he was still blissfully unaware that his empire was built on a crumbling foundation. By nightfall, I got a delivery confirmation from Henry's office. Read at 4:36 p.m. 3 words, no response. But I didn't need one. The system had started counting, and soon it would stop. By Wednesday morning, the building didn't hum. It creaked. You could practically hear the servers sweating through the walls. The system wasn't down, not yet, but it had started whispering its warnings. First came the invoice failures. Procurement tried to process a standard bulk renewal for cold storage services. The system flagged it as unauthorized custodian signature, null. It bounced 3 times before the internal ledger locked it. Then came the emails. One from the Department of Agriculture. Please confirm current compliance officer on file. Recent activity logs show unsigned transfers. Another from the Office of Logistics Management. We are unable to verify the authenticity of your Q3 filing. Has your point of contact changed? Legal started getting jumpy. Finance started twitching. Meanwhile, Brandon slapped on his fake calm voice and told everyone it was just residual noise from deprecated legacy integrations. I didn't hear any of this firsthand. I didn't have to. Mike from shipping texted me around noon. Hey, not to pry, but did Brandon mess something up? People are freaking. Sarah DM'd me on social media a few hours later. Bella, something's wrong. Your system won't open for anyone. Brandon said you left it oversecured, but that doesn't sound right. Did you do something? No, Sarah, I replied to myself. I didn't do something. I did everything. I followed protocol. I played by the rules. I just knew the rules better than the fools trying to replace me. From my couch, wrapped in a blanket I'd crocheted years ago, I scrolled through the quiet unraveling like it was a soap opera I'd already watched but still enjoyed. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about peace. The kind of peace that comes when your truth doesn't need explaining anymore. I sipped tea while the world I'd held together with grit and willpower started to wobble without me. That system was old and fragile. Not because it was weak, but because it had been running for years on my institutional memory. Brandon never asked what I did, never wondered why a logistics analyst had clearance levels 3 tiers above his. And now, even the building could tell something was off. It was 7:46 p.m. when Brandon's phone rang. He was halfway through a mediocre takeout pad thai, watching a show he didn't understand. The ringtone jolted him. It was his work line. He groaned and answered. Brandon here. Brandon, this is Marion from procurement. The voice snapped. Why are all our federal transactions frozen? He blinked. I'm sorry, what? I have 5 flagged orders, all government-facing, stuck in authorization review. The system won't accept new transactions until previous logs are verified, which, by the way, haven't updated since Monday morning. Brandon stood up. That doesn't make sense. We submitted the logs. It must be a permissions issue. I'll just pull the logs myself. He hung up. He already knew it was too late. He tried to log into the system from his work laptop. Access denied. Authority token invalid. Error code. SIG chain mismatch. He frowned. He called IT. I need emergency access to Vault 77. The night tech, Julio, replied. We've been trying since Monday. The vault's not recognizing any of the backup tokens. What about system override? Brandon asked, his voice shaking. Bella disabled that 2 years ago with legal sign-off. She rewrote the fallback logic. We only have 1 custodian slot now. It was part of a security update. Brandon's face flushed. Julio added, unless you get Bella to manually reassign the token, the system's going to go into full lock mode at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Brandon hung up. For the first time, he felt real fear. Not just irritation, but a bone-deep, oh God, this is actually happening fear. He opened his email and typed, Bella King at http://www.google.com/search queueuppersonnelmail.com. Subject, urgent. Bella, please confirm. Did you officially leave the company? There seems to be a situation developing with the compliance systems. We would really appreciate your help resolving a few items. He hovered, then hit send. A few miles away, I was in my kitchen with a glass of red wine, the last slice of leftover lasagna. My laptop pinged. I saw the subject line and didn't even open it. Then came a second ping from H. Harrison, CEO. Subject: urgent. Did you leave? Just that. I stared at the screen for a long moment. He knew, or was beginning to, but I didn't reply because I didn't need to. The window had closed. The transfer was never made. The system was holding the line. At exactly 9 a.m. tomorrow, that line would snap. Thursday, 8:59 a.m. The morning meeting was tense. Everyone filed in like they were walking into a courtroom. Chloe clutched her coffee with both hands like it might protect her. Even Mike from shipping had stopped trying to make jokes. Brandon sat at the head of the table, his fake smile long gone. He was in the middle of some line about stabilizing operations when the glass doors slammed open. Not pushed, but slammed with a force that made the whole room flinch. In stormed Mr. Harrison, the CEO, red-faced, breathing hard like he'd jogged the stairs. He wasn't carrying a laptop or a phone, just a single, thick blue folder clutched in one hand. He stopped dead center at the table, looked at no one in particular, and bellowed, "Where is she?" No one moved. It was like a horror movie jump scare without the music. Brandon stood halfway. "Mr. Harrison, I assume you're referring to Bella." "I'm referring to Bella." "Where is she?" Brandon glanced at Chloe, then back at Harrison. She was part of the restructuring initiative. We've since redistributed her tasks to... Harrison slammed the folder onto the table. People jumped. The folder burst open just enough for the top page to slide out, marked with a fat red header. Notice of Federal Contract Suspension. System integrity unverified. Sarah gasped. Chloe dropped her coffee. Harrison turned slowly toward Brandon, his voice low now, razor sharp. "You restructured the only person on staff certified to maintain our compliance system? The one who, I don't know, personally built the patch that kept our $240 million in contracts from collapsing?" Brandon tried to recover. We assumed that the system had transitioned. We assigned a team." "Assumed?" Harrison snapped. "Do you assume your parachute works before you jump out of the plane, Brandon?" The room was dead silent. Harrison turned back to the table and pointed to the second page. "Effective immediately, all federal transactions are frozen. All contract workflows have been red flagged, and we are officially under preliminary investigation for failure to maintain custodial oversight." Chloe looked like she might cry. Brandon cleared his throat and reached for his laptop. "I can fix this. We'll reach out, have Bella reauthorize access." "She's under no obligation." Harrison cut him off. "You fired her. You revoked her clearance. You removed the signature without a replacement in place. She followed protocol." "You didn't." "Wait," David whispered from the end of the table. "She was the actual custodian of record?" Harrison barked. "Of course she was! Why the hell do you think she had higher clearance than me on Vault 77? Because she was handpicked by me to hold that system together after the vendor collapsed. She was the keystone." Brandon finally sat down. No more spin, no more buzzwords. Just a man slowly realizing he'd pulled the wrong thread, and now the entire tapestry was unraveling. "Sir?" he tried, softer now. "I didn't know." Harrison didn't look at him. He just shook his head once. "You didn't ask." And then he turned and left the room. Not a word more, not a plan, not a promise. Just stormed out the same way he came, leaving a silence so thick it felt like the oxygen had been turned off. Back at home, I was on my second cup of coffee. My inbox was clean. My phone screen lit up again with a single text from an unknown number. "Please just tell me how to stop this." I didn't respond because by now they weren't asking for help. They were asking for a miracle, and miracles weren't part of my job description anymore. The boardroom that afternoon felt less like a meeting and more like a funeral. Brandon sat at the far end of the table, collar undone, eyes darting like a trapped animal. The legal team was huddled in silence. Harrison stood at the head of the table. His voice, when it finally broke the silence, was a low, dangerous calm. "Ryan," he said, "do you even know what her job actually was?" Brandon blinked, then tried again. She managed ops reporting, internal workflows, legacy documentation procedures. I thought... "No," Harrison interrupted, shaking his head. "She was the only federally certified custodian for our supply chain infrastructure. The only one. You fired the signature. You didn't just fire an employee, you erased our legal right to operate." Harrison kept going, his voice rising slightly. "Bella was vetted by the Office of Contractual Integrity. She passed Level 3 clearance when our vendor collapsed. You know why we never replaced her? Because we couldn't." He slammed a manila folder down in front of Brandon. "Bella's clearance profile, sealed with a federal stamp. This wasn't just an HR file. This was a security contract, and you signed the offboarding form like you were tossing out expired printer toner." Brandon stared at the document like it might bite him. "I didn't know," he whispered. "That's the problem," Harrison shot back. "You didn't know. You didn't ask. You assumed. You thought she was just another quiet worker bee, pushing buttons while you strutted around babbling about streamlining." Brandon tried to stand. "We can fix it. Call her. Offer her a reinstatement." "It's already been reported," snapped Sarah from legal. Her custodian role was marked vacated and confirmed by the Federal Compliance Office. She filed it clean, precise, by the book. The CTO added, "The audit lock is automated." Vault 77 began its countdown the moment her token was revoked. Harrison stared at the ceiling. "So you're telling me we're done?" "Unless she comes back voluntarily and signs a new custodial agreement," Sarah said. "Can't we push a reinstatement form?" Brandon asked, his voice cracking. "It won't matter," the CTO replied. "Not without her physical presence. She built biometric tie-ins. The system knows it's her. Can't fake that." Harrison rubbed his face and turned to Sarah. "Do we have a number for her?" "She didn't answer our last 3 calls or emails." Harrison looked across the table, past legal, past IT, straight at Brandon. "I gave you the keys to something you didn't understand. Instead of learning what it was, you set it on fire." Brandon looked down at his hands. "I thought she wasn't visible. I didn't think she mattered." "Sometimes," Harrison said, his voice like a closing door, "the quiet ones are the only thing holding the roof up." No one spoke after that. Back at home, I was reading a book, a novel, something with no acronyms. My phone vibrated once, a new voicemail from an unknown number. I let it sit. I'd already done my job, and no one, not Brandon, not the board, not even Mr. Harrison, could undo what had already been triggered. The contract was void. The clock had run out. The roof had started to collapse. Thursday, 9:00 a.m. Sharp. No alarms, no sirens, no dramatic countdowns like in the movies. Just a single line of red text that blinked into existence on every monitor across 3 floors of the operations wing. Quiet, clinical. Authorization lock. Custodian role vacated. All contract-related systems suspended per federal compliance protocol. And just like that, $240 million in active government contracts flatlined. Finance terminals froze. Procurement dashboards grayed out. The audit console stopped responding, showing nothing but that red line. Even the janitorial contract triggered a red flag. Brandon was nowhere to be found. Mr. Harrison, already in the war room, watched the red message appear on the big screen. No one said a word. Then came the emails. One from the Department of Defense. A firm is placed on administrative hold pending full custodial reassessment. Another from the Federal Office of Logistics. We are initiating a third-party review of contract eligibility. Mr. Harrison sat perfectly still. Then he leaned towards Sarah and whispered, "Do we still have a shot at getting her back?" Sarah didn't look up from the screen. "She's under no obligation now. The moment we submitted the offboarding, she became a civilian again." Silence settled like ash. At 9:07 a.m., Chloe stood from her desk and walked into the hallway. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. Just leaned against the wall and stared at the floor. Legal began pulling logs. Finance began drafting loss estimates. Someone in legal muttered, "We're going to get sued into the afterlife." But Mr. Harrison, he just stared at the screen, at that blinking red banner, at the ghost of the woman he trusted, the one he never should have let HR touch. Across town, in a quiet cafe with black tile floors and too many Edison bulbs, I sat near the window, reading. My phone buzzed once on the table. I glanced down. Unfamiliar number, no message. Then another buzz, then a third. I didn't need to check. I already knew. They were calling because they finally understood. Not out of respect. Not even regret, just fear. Fear of the systems I'd held together. Fear of the silence I left behind. I picked up the phone, let it vibrate in my palm a second longer, then pressed and held the power button. The screen went black. In that moment, it wasn't revenge. It wasn't bitterness. It was something simpler, closure. I didn't burn the bridge. I just let them walk off it and watched from a distance as the structure they thought didn't need me collapsed under its own arrogance. The lesson here is simple. Value the quiet ones. In every organization, there are individuals who operate behind the scenes, holding everything together with their expertise, dedication, and institutional memory. They may not be the loudest or the most visible, but their contributions are often the most critical. This story reminds us that true leadership isn't about grand gestures or superficial changes, but about recognizing and respecting the invisible work that sustains success. Never assume that a person's role is simple just because it looks that way. The most crucial work is often done by those who aren't seeking the spotlight. Acknowledge and appreciate the quiet architects of your success.